This is Brian Robertson, and today's date is December the 2nd, 2008, and we are in the main library, the Central Arkansas Library System, doing an interview for the Arkansas Korean War Project. And your name, sir?
I'm Perry Whitmore. I live in North Little Rock, Arkansas at 31 Pine Tree Loop, zip code 72116. I am a Korean War veteran.
Very good. Well, Mr. Whitmore, could you tell me a little bit about your background, when you were born, where you were born, that sort of thing?
I was born in 1926 in DeQueen, Arkansas, Sevier County, and lived there until I went in the Army after during World War II, the latter stages. Actually, the war was almost over when I entered, and I stayed about a year and a half. Primarily, I guess I met not political prisoners, but bad acting prisoners coming in New York area, New Jersey, and we took them to primarily to some federal prison in Massachusetts, somewhere near Boston. I've forgotten the time. And we also guarded what turned out to be escorted more than guarded, I guess. United Nations. I don't recall that they called it that then. Oddly enough, the way I qualified for that, I was 5 foot 10 inches tall and weighed 170 pounds, and I wasn't over imposing because at least the delegates we represented were represented guarded, were Near Eastern people, and they were relatively small.
Right.
They didn't want us to.
Didn't want to seem imposing, I guess. Yeah.
Which, after a while, they had more soldiers, I guess, than they needed, and they said if you would go to college, they'd let you out, and I said I would. Got out early and went to college.
So did you come back home then?
Yeah.
Before then? So where did you grow up at?
DeQueen. I finished high school in DeQueen and went in the Army from DeQueen.
All right. So what did your dad do for a living?
When I was I guess you'd say the Depression came along, he and my uncle had a feed, seed, and fertilizer business, which is kind of a rough grocery thing. They bought cow hides and possum hides and sort of everything, kind of. They weren't a fancy grocery store, but they sold flour and things like that. Unfortunately, they came along with the idea we needed another bank in DeQueen. Somebody did. This is hearsay, of course. And so they supported that concept and bought a little stock, and the bank didn't last very long, so they went broke. And during that period of time, when the bank went broke, they assessed the stockholders. Of course, it wasn't much to assess, really, but anyway, if there had been any hope of making it through the Depression, that went away when they folded them up. They never declared formal bankruptcy. I asked a lawyer later why they never declared bankruptcy, and he said, well, you had to go to Texarkana to go to federal court to declare bankruptcy, and it was 50-something miles from DeQueen. Everybody knew you didn't have any money. Why go down there? So they didn't try to.
Oh, that makes sense. So do you remember much about growing up and living through the Depression? What those times were like?
We sort of lived on a farm, we had about 30 acres where we lived, and then we had about 40 acres, what they call the bottom, kind of always a mile or so from where we actually lived. And that was where we grew cotton and corn primarily, and around up there where we lived, they had the cows and pigs and horses, things like that. And we'd get up in the morning and go down to that farm, really where they raised the corn and the cotton. And we sort of made it through the Depression, I guess, doing that. Ultimately, when I was about 13 or 14, I've forgotten now. Anyway, we gave up farming. I don't really know why exactly. But my dad went to town and he worked. My uncle had been brought back there on what they call the cow, sow, and hen program, which I'm sure was somehow federally funded. And we had a cheese factory, I remember that. And the idea was you'd milk cows, take the milk to the cheese factory, and there was a whey that came out of the processing the cheese, and you were to take that whey and feed it to cows, pigs and chickens. And of course the queen, the only thing that really made it was the chicken business. And I noticed that recently this morning's paper where one of the large chicken processing places is now in bankruptcy, and one of the places they mentioned was the Queen. And of course my uncle actually had nothing to do with them. They shipped the chickens out live. They shipped them on railroad cars, among other things, to Cincinnati, Ohio. Kroger Company.
Really?
And they had special cars, and they put the live chickens on there, and some fellow would have to ride in there with them and feed them, water them between the Queen and Cincinnati, Ohio. And then the others, they carried to New Orleans and places like that. Mostly the people would come from New Orleans and buy them live. They didn't process all that came later.
Did you ever help out on that? Any of that stuff?
I worked at that. During World War II, there, everybody went off to war or went off to war work in California and the East Coast. Various people would come in there and solicit workers, and they'd carry them off, pay their way, and so forth. And most of my high school friends that didn't go immediately into service went to Connecticut and Massachusetts in that area. And then
it's a big jump from
my father went to Washington, worked in the logwoods. They did that. The company did that. Came down here and hired a goodly number of people from around that neck of the woods.
I'd always heard that there were a lot of Arkansans that ended up in Washington in the apple business, working up there.
Well, oddly enough, this town that they went to, my father included, was you go there to work, which I did while I was in law school. You would think you caught the wrong train, because when you got off there and looked around, it looked like a desert. There wasn't any trees or anything really. And you'd go up what they call a mesa, and up on top of the mesa was a level piece of ground. I don't know how wide, how long, several miles, and they raised apples. I had to water them. So
you did that while you were in college?
I did that while I was in college.
Like during the summer, you'd go up there?
Yeah.
That was, where did you go to college at?
Fayetteville.
Fayetteville, at the University of Arkansas. What were you studying up there?
Law.
Law school.
I went to law school there. I went to pre-law at Conway, what was then State Teachers College. And the reason I went there, I was one of the few people from between Arkansas, there went there, I guess, is that the colleges were full because of the time I was out doing it, they were letting veterans out by the double handful. And you kind of had to have a in, although they made a good effort of trying to make sure everybody had an education. But I had a distant relative that was dean of men in Conway State Teachers College. And someone called him and said, we need to find a place for this boy to go to school. And he said, well, send him up here. If I have to take him home with me, I will. See that he gets educated. Well, I didn't have to go home with him, but anyway, he got me a place to stay and all that sort of stuff. And I went there for 2 years. And I don't know whether you're interested in this or not, but
You're smiling, so I think I'm interested. It must be funny.
I was interviewed up at the university not too many months ago, and they asked me why in the world I chose law school. This had to do with going on the GI Bill of Rights. And I was telling them that I went to college because I was running from poverty. You could find a job at the Queen if you could load pulpwood, or if you could, I've forgotten the term they used to it, if you could turn the log in a sawmill. I did a little of both of those. And that's hard work either way you look at it. And I thought there's got to be a better way of serving the Lord than tearing up your hands this way. So my uncle said, why don't you go to law? He didn't say law school. He said, why don't you go to college? You got the GI Bill of Rights. And I kind of fudged a little bit because I told him I'd go to college when I got out of the Army, because they let you out a little earlier, supposedly. So I thought, well, that sounds like a good idea. They had what they call the 52-20. You got $52 for 20 weeks. You got $20 for 52 weeks. I've forgotten which way it was. And at the end of that, you went to loading pulpwood. So I didn't. I don't remember how many weeks I was off there between deciding to go to law school.
Right.
I didn't decide to go to law school, but what I decided to do, I had a cousin, woman, who had gone to college, and she was a home ec major. And she brought home the idea that if you were a home ec major or a Smith-Hughes teacher, Smith-Hughes was the high school equivalent of home ec.
Okay.
Taught agriculture. Well, you got a bonus from the federal government. I think it was $50. I don't remember a month. Or maybe it's $50 for 12 months out of the year. Anyway, that's what I thought I'd do when I went to college. So unfortunately, my relative up there at Conway didn't tell me ahead of time because we didn't discuss it. But they had discontinued agriculture teachings in Conway because they decided, I guess, to emphasize teaching. Needed teachers. Anyway, when I got up there, they told me that they discontinued agriculture and I should go to tech. I didn't have a bed at tech, and I didn't know where tech was, to be honest with you, so I didn't budge. I decided I'd stay there.
Stay there and go to school. So,
I finished law school in 1951, I guess, and almost immediately went into service.
now you were in the ROTC program at Fayetteville.
They promised me if I joined the ROTC, that was my senior year, 1950. That's when the Korean War broke out. And when we returned to college that year, I was working in Memphis in a sawmill type thing for the summer. And that's when the Korean War broke out. And I'd called 2 or 3 of my buddies who were kind of like me. They'd gotten out a little early, and we decided, I don't know whether it was in the paper or how, we got a hold of the idea that we were about number 1 on the list to go back into service because we had some training. And we had not given our full share. And so we were concerned whether or not we'd get through the last year of law school.
Mm-hmm.
So when we went up there, my buddy had already gotten all the dope, I guess you'd say, and he had, we were sort of promised that if we'd enter this program, 1 year of ROTC, that we would be guaranteed that we'd get through that year, and that we would be eligible then. They didn't say we would go, but they did say we would be eligible to receive a commission.
Mm-hmm.
And so my buddy backed out. I went ahead and did it. He became president of Arkansas Western Gas, which grew into a company that's now developing all this gas well up here. And he and his engineer are the one that started all that.
Oh, really?
Needless to say, he's about the millionaire.
Yeah, I'd say he's doing pretty good now.
I said that showed our intelligence. He knew what he was doing. I talked longer than I should have.
Oh, no.
That sort of fits my life, I guess.
No, that's perfect. So, do you remember once the South Korea invaded North Korea, you remember, outside of thinking about, oh, well, we might get called up, did you follow what was going on in Korea?
Yeah, and you turned it around there. It's North Korea invaded
Oh,
South
did I?
Korea.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
We could always look north and here they'd come. We could run south and maybe we get away from them.
That's true.
That's pretty simple.
Yeah, very simple. So did you got to finish up the last year of law school. Did you keep up in the papers what was going on, knowing where you might be going?
It was big news.
Yeah.
During that time they had a rough go, They liked to run them plumb off
Right.
the peninsula.
Right.
Oddly enough, the regiment that I ultimately joined, I was assigned to. I don't know exactly, I didn't exactly join it, they assigned me. But anyway, it was one of the ones, units that went up and landed in Incheon landing, and helped the group break out of the
Pusan perimeter. Yeah.
Pusan Peninsula.
Yeah.
When I got over there, it was, they'd been up and back and were going up again, and we finished up the line.
Mm-hmm.
They drew one line, and I don't know why they drew another line. And when I was over there, they'd drawn that, which was the final line, the 30th parallel.
38 parallel.
38 parallel. That's our units, or our group, or whatever you call them. We straightened up the line. They had to take hills.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, we ended up on I guess what you'd say was militarily good hills all along the 38 parallel.
So did you have any training before you got shipped over?
Yeah, after we finished ROTC, we went to summer camp. That's where we were commissioned.
Okay. Where was that at?
At the Fort Texas. Fort
Fort
Hood,
Hood.
Texas. And then when they called us in, they sent us to Fort Benning, Georgia. I guess fortunately and unfortunately, by then I was a full-fledged lawyer on paper. And when they would run short on lawyers, they'd go, there was another fellow there with me in my same unit in Fort Benning, and they'd call on one of the other of us. The Army rule was that the defense lawyer could not be less in rank and age and all than the prosecutor. So what we'd end up doing was prosecuting all the time because we were the youngest in age, in not necessarily age, but in rank, I guess you'd say.
Right.
So as a result of that, I didn't get a full load of training, I don't think, but you know, it was.
Remember what kind of training you did get while you were there?
Yeah, I'll have to tell you, you know, I'll jump ahead 40 years and say that my wife and I got involved in helping organize the meeting in which our regimental, this is 40 years later, regimental units cased its colors. In case you don't know what that means, it means they retired the colors, at least temporarily, and it took place at Port Ord, California. Well, we had Korean veterans and World War II veterans primarily, and the World War II veteran, I say this lovingly, was primarily, at least in that division, that was an old Army division, fought at Bull Run and all that sort of stuff. And most of the people, it was active before World War II. So as a result, all of the fellows that would finish the CCC, you know what the CCC, they'd finish the CC enlistment, they'd come back home still with anything to do, so they'd join the Army. And a lot of them ended up in Fort Ord, and you know, they were basically uneducated. Now that, I guess being frank about it, anyway, despite the fact that we sent 4 notices to be sure and get you a reservation for your room and this, that, and the other, at least 30% of them just ended up out there gawking around. And Margie and I'd have to find them somewhere to stay, and they'd run off and leave their medicine. We'd have to get them medicine. When they got ready to go home, I think it lasted 5 days. We had to get them on buses and get them to the various events that lasted 5 days. Then we had to get them home. So after it's all over with, Margie and I, my wife, were coming home and driving. We'd have to take all the papers out there and do all this. Anyway, I said, well, what do you think? And she said, well, I've always wondered why it was you ended up in there. Now I know. She said, I've got it figured out that it was done on the basis of an IQ of 70. If you scale the 70 minimum, you got to go to the Air Force or Quartermaster Corps or artillery or something. If you were 70 or less, you ended up in the infantry. I said, well, you may have something there. Not wishing to start an argument.
I don't buy that.
Then she said, after a while, she said, I still don't know. How with that limitation you ended up finishing law school. Anyway, I got off the subject.
No.
But anyway, we went to Benning and went through that officer's training. And we studied, believe it or not, we studied primarily, according to this fellow that was our leader, the tactics of a fellow well known in the South named Stonewall Jackson.
Huh.
And he didn't start it, but he perfected the concept of infantry tactics of fire and maneuver. Jumping ahead again 40 or 50 years, it lasted through all the wars that we've had up until then, until the Vietnam War. Fire and maneuver requires one stationary simplicity is one stationary bunch and then a bunch to maneuver around. Well, the Vietnam War, according to authorities of some nature, changed that because the maneuvering around got to be by helicopter, immediate.
Right.
The old way was you had to sort of slug your way through. Anyway, that's what we learned in Benning. I've seen where some people have written, some lieutenants had trained at Benning. I always felt a little angry at them because I thought they did a pretty good job of training us. But anyway, they say they didn't train us much. You know, really and truly, for lieutenants, company grade officers, it doesn't take a lot of brain power to fire and maneuver. You can do one or the other pretty good. It just takes plain old stamina, I guess. Anyway, after we left there, I went to I went to Fort Ord, California, and that was a training, infantry training here at the camp. Well, when I got there, the fellow that was a judge advocate, a colonel, just thought it was a disgrace for a man with a law degree to end up training recruits. So I ended up in the judge advocate's office there in Fort Ord, California. And I stayed, what they would normally do, it took about, I believe 17 weeks for a recruit to come in the Army and be trained. So you'd stay at Fort Ord, I keep saying Fort Benning. Stay at Fort Ord for about 17 weeks, and then you've been through a training sessions, and then you're ready to go overseas. Well, my 17 weeks was spent in the Judge Advocates Corps, where I just did, primarily I was what they call a legal affairs officer, and my primary responsibility was to answer questions and get people lawyers, soldiers, lawyers, things like that. And I would occasionally have to fill in as a trial lawyer in a court-martial case, but most of the time I was in there. I'll give you one example. A sergeant comes in there one day, and he said that his wife, who was in about mid-term pregnancy, had a episode during the weekend, and they had rushed her to the local civilian hospital downtown Monterey, and that she was well treated, and now she's ready to come home, and he goes there to get her. The doctor called him and told him, civilian doctor, he could come get her and take her home. She's doing well. He went to get her, and they said, you owe, I don't remember now what the bill was, nothing like you'd owe today for 3 or 4 days in the hospital, but anyway, it was $280 or some such sum, more than he could handle. They said you gotta have that and pay it before you take your wife home. And he was at a loss of how to get it. I don't know that this has anything to do with legal training. He's a broad-shouldered, big fellow, sergeant. I said, well, Sergeant, I'll tell you what, I can't figure out any way to give you get you $280, but I'll tell you what you do. You go and get 3 or 4 of your buddies that are about your size. Incidentally, he said at the time, he said, you give me my wife's clothes, and I'll take her home. I said, you get about 4 of your buddies. Don't take anything like a knife or a weapon of any kind, but take your wife some clothes, and you go down and say nothing to nobody till you get your wife dressed and your buddies with you, and you all just walk out of the hospital. And I said, don't let anybody stop you. If somebody tries to stop you, don't battle them, just walk past them, keep going. He did that.
Huh.
Well, you could imagine that was good legal advice, to say the least. Anyway, it worked. Well, in the meantime, I thought to myself, he's going to have problems because he's violated some civil criminal laws, I'm sure. So I called a fellow I'd gotten acquainted with who was a lawyer downtown. I said, I hope you're patriotic because I got a little chore for you. And I told him my story. He said, don't worry about a thing. He said, I'll call down there and tell them whenever they get them, give me a call and I'll come down. And they did, and he did.
Huh.
Other than getting my you-know-what chewed out, like this worked just fine. Boy promised to pay it. I think he signed a note ultimately to pay the, I say boy, the sergeant, ultimately to pay the hospital bill.
Well, you helped him out, and that's what you were there for.
That didn't improve my standing much around there. As a lawyer, that wasn't very good legal advice. Then, after a while, they told me it's time for me to go overseas, and I thought sure I'd go over there and be a advocate or something, because I'd heard from some of my buddies, and that's what they seemed to be doing. Anyway, I went overseas, and there were I guess 5 of us that were signed to the 32nd Infantry Regiment.
So how did you get over there? Did you go on ship?
We flew.
Oh, you flew, okay.
I'll tell you my story about flying over there. We went on a civilian plane. I suppose there's 25 or 30 of us on this plane. We had a nice little, what do you call the people that kind of look after you on the airplane?
Stewardess?
Stewardess.
Right.
And she just tended to us like you would want. She was real pleasant and all. We had a nice trip over there until we left Wake Island, which was the last place we stopped before we got to Japan. And it was about midnight, I guess. We left there dark, real dark. Well, everybody kind of dozed off, and the lady got her pillows and all that sort of stuff. And we went, woke up the next morning, and I looked out my window, and I could almost dive out of that plane and hit that water without any problem. Everybody was stirring and buzzing around there, and finally the pilot comes on. I guess it was the pilot anyway. Someone comes on the loudspeaker and said, "You probably noticed we're flying rather low. We've lost all but one engine on this plane." But he said, "Don't worry. We have 2, I've forgotten what he called them, fight planes, I believe he said, that are flying along with us. And if we ditch, they've got color schemes, and they'll put those color schemes in. And they last, I won't say, he said they'll last 30 minutes. And during that 30 minutes, you exit the plane and you got those things to put on to keep you afloat. And we've got, I guess it's Wake Island, I don't remember now who it was alerted, and boats are between here and there to come pick you up. Some fellow in the middle of all that stood up and he recited verbatim. Blithe verse, right spirit, bird thy never work, which was ode to some kind of a bird. Why in the world? I thought that was unusual for him to be able to recite that. Needless to say, we did get to, I guess we landed, yeah, we did. We landed in Japan, where we were supposed to, without further incident, except I kept thinking that thing getting lower and lower along the way. We landed in Japan, and then we went from Japan by boat over to Korea.
You remember where you
Well,
were?
there's probably 3 or 4 days in there that I don't know what we did. I mean, you know, we didn't, I guess we were assigned units and
Right.
that sort of stuff, processed some way, but we were free, and, you know, we got to go downtown and things like that and see a little bit of Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And we were near, I don't know exactly where we were, but we were fairly close to Tokyo because we did go in Tokyo, kind of looking around. And then we went overseas. We landed in Busan, which is at the southern end of this island. I don't remember now, we might have been there a day or so. And then we got on a train and went north. They had weapons, rifles in a container thing there that we weren't given weapons, but they said that the snipers shot at these planes, and sometimes there would be several of them get up and they'd actually attack the train, so we had these rifles available. And that one man was given the key to the lock, so if it did happen, well, they'd unlock the rifle rack thing so you could get a rifle. Well, of course, the only thing about that was that sure kept you awake at night. You kept looking out to see if you could see some guy trying to shoot at you, but they didn't. And we ended up in our respective regiments.
What unit were you in?
32nd Infantry Regiment. Started out in the 1st Battalion, A Company. I was a platoon leader in A Company. And ultimately, I guess I was there 6 months. And then I Company, which is in the 3rd Battalion, got pretty well wiped out. And I was assigned over to I Company as a platoon leader initially, and almost immediately that fellow went home, the company commander, who was one of the few survivors of an attack on them. And we were, I became company commander of I Company. I guess I'd been there a week or so when
Were you still a lieutenant?
I was still somewhere along the line. After 6 months, they raised me to 1st lieutenant. And while I was in I Company, I guess I got the break of my life in the sense that they sent a fellow over there that was a West Pointer, and they were going to give him the company so he'd have experience as a company. And he took over I Company. Well, they have the policy of the Army was that you didn't ever do that. If you'd ever been commander, they wasn't going to put another commander on you, and you'd have to step down. Which incidentally saved my life in a way, because I Company had the worst cook you've ever seen. And I couldn't figure out how to get rid of him or get a cook that was worth a hoot. The whole mess thing was only good thing that ever happened to that mess deal was that they got the idea they're going to experiment. We wanted hot food for the troops. We were dug in up there on the hillside. And looking at the map, they figured out they could put a mess tent up there, and they couldn't get artillery on it in my sector, in my country. And they did that. They put the mess tent up there. Well, and it was nice. We had hot meals 3 times a day there. And we'd go 30 at a time, go back and eat in shifts. It was nice. And I guess it was there about a week, and I don't know whether that made the Koreans especially mad or Chinese. But anyway, they set in to, somebody said they're trying to reach that mess hall so they get something good to eat. But anyway, they set in, and they lit in on us like you wouldn't believe. About, I guess it was the second day I went back there, and the mess tent had, of course, we didn't try to go back there when we was under fire. But anyway, the mess tent had been turned into a hospital. They had all tables for wounded people, doctors up for treatment. I always think of MASH, you know, they, of course, normally MASH people didn't, that sophisticated type doctor didn't come up there at all. We had a battalion doctor. But anyway, they had pretty sophisticated medicine up there in that thing. Well, we finally calmed them down and didn't give them breakfast or anything. And about 2 days later, some guy figured out, and he hit that, some Chinese, he hit that mess tent. Fortunately, he hit it at night when there wasn't anybody in it. And he knocked all tent down. We'd sandbagged around it pretty good. Knocked all the sandbags, knocked all the equipment, just burned it, set it afire even. Anyway, they decided they wouldn't fool around putting mess tents up there anymore.
So now
I'm sure ratting and raving here.
No, you're doing fine. You're doing really well.
I'm sure you've got a lot of people that have a lot more to say about the war.
Oh no, this is exactly what we're looking for. So when exactly did you arrive in Korea? That would have been 52?
Yeah, it would have been, it had been either May or June in 52, I guess, because it seemed like it was kind of warm weather. I know we wore khaki clothes. And as a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure it was longer than there because, you know, by that summer of 52, we straightened out that mine. And we never could take one place they called it James Russell Hill because you know who James Russell is. It had the shape of James Russell on it. They called it James Russell Hill. And you know, first one and then the other would make a run at it. And finally in October, they gave us the assignment. And in the meantime, we were taking little smaller pieces of terrain. You know, it wasn't a dance in the park, but you didn't get completely clobbered. We could get enough folks on there to run them off, you know, pretty.
Do you remember your first combat experience?
Oh, heaven, yes, I had look. They have what they call a basic ammunition. You know, they say get a basic load of ammunition. I had so much ammunition I could hardly breathe. Come to find out, you do a lot more running than you do shooting. I found that out the next time. I just barely had a few shells, good tennis shoes. Oh, yeah, I thought, boy, won't catch me short hill on that one. I'll get it.
So what kind of weapon did you have? Did you have
I had a little carbine.
M1?
Incidentally, I gave the carbine away later and just took it home in cold weather. That carbine, at least mine, I had trouble, I guess, keeping it clean, because I've heard people say that they didn't have trouble. Mine wouldn't fire, and so the M1, you know, is clip fed. I got to where I'd carry that M1 because it would fire. You know, it might just take it a minute or two to get warmed up. Boom, 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 and then boy, it'd come at you. It'd work. That was when cold weather came. I found that out. But they had those carbines, and really, after the initial run, I guess you'd say, a time or two, I didn't do much shooting, because normally you're trying to, you know, make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to do, as a rule.
So what were you?
Somebody said, have you ever asked God to forgive you for the people you shot? And I said, the poor shot that I won, I never hit it. They weren't in danger when I shoot.
So when you were on the line, what were your positions like? Did you have trenches and bunkers?
Ultimately, we would usually take about 5 days for them you'd take the hill, and then it'd take 4 or 5 days for them to give up trying to retake it. That's just sort of a routine. And what you do, of course, is immediately dig in when you got up there, and of course you couldn't find a place in Korea, I don't guess, one of those hills where you could do much digging. You'd throw rocks up around you. They said 2-man foxholes. Normally you just barely get one, you know what I mean? Each guy just rolled him up something there and trying to get under it the best he could. And then as time went on, and first if you get out trying to dig a hole, they'd hit you with artillery. In fact, they'd hit you with artillery all the time. They loved artillery. I never had figured it out, because they was having to carry it most, you know, the Chinese. But mortars were even more popular, I guess. Anyway, if you got out and stirred around much, they'd throw mortars in on you. And, but, you know, you just kind of have to dig in here, there, and yonder, so to speak. And that's one thing I said. I went back, I'd never be a lieutenant again, because you never had a time to dig a hole. You were having to pick out places to go and put the machine guns and that sort of stuff, and then you've been called back with the company commander to tell you this, that, and the other, and all that.
So how were those positions manned? Were they on company level or platoon level? Or?
Well, you know, we started out with the basic thing with a squad, and that was 10 people. And we had I'm not sure they've ever publicized this, but at least in our unit, you started out with a South Korean and a Puerto Rican, or a person of that, and a black person. So yeah, we were the first integrated army. And I don't think that'd be popular today, but they fought, and as far as I know, they did. I don't have any criticism at all of the black soldier. In fact, they were just great. But you'd sign a buddy to each one of them. And theoretically, that South Korean, Puerto Rican, or we call them Puerto Ricans, I think they were mostly, there was a deal on them. Someone said that if you were a Mexican national, if you join the army, they give you your citizenship after you finish your tour. And I always thought most of them were that. And the South Korean, he couldn't speak English, you know. And what would happen was your unit and get, particularly when you're on line, like I was saying, you're digging in and trying to defend for 4 or 5 days, well, you'd get replacements. Well, you didn't have time to go around there and try to say, you go on the 3rd platoon and you do this and you do that, and you'd get like Poor Korean or something that would have a language barrier. And, you know, GIs are always good at sense of humor, I guess you'd say, and they'd name them. Like, I remember one we had there was Heckle and Jekyll, you know, the 2 crows, and they would, they couldn't understand the word you were saying.
So did each soldier have a buddy assigned to
You don't
him?
have a buddy, and you'd hear them.
Really?
You could hear them when you get under fire at night, particularly. You'd hear them holler, buddy, get over here. Get your A here. You could hear them hollering at one another. It worked. And I don't know that everybody did that. I don't know that we did it. And then when you get back off the line, you'd try to take them and split them up, and make assignments out of them.
Did you ever have any South Korean officers, or was it just
No.
enlisted men?
All listed men.
Okay.
We, one time there, we had 4. How would that fellow describe them? Reservation Indian. All 4 of them were raised and lived on reservation. One of them, oddly enough, one of them was a Crow, and the other one was a Sioux, and the Crow and the Sioux, I found out, listened to them. Of course, they didn't do that. They're, you know, mortal enemies. They fought
traditionally,
centuries
they
ago.
used to fight all the time.
We had a good bunch. And I always said I thought that was one reason, you know, with the Korean soldier got the reputation of being bug outs, you know, they've said there. I guess first part of the war they did, they weren't expecting it or something. Well, of course, I take a certain amount of pride in saying that we didn't have that. Of course, the reason we didn't have it wasn't me. The reason we didn't have it is when they introduced me to my platoon sergeant, I looked at him and I thought, my brother got old John Wayne in here. I said, Duke, you look a lot younger than you did when you were in that movie about the Sands of Iwo Jima. He said, Duke, I can see he didn't have any sense of humor. Turns out he joined the Army at 16. He was from West Virginia, and his father was a coal miner, and he had black lung. And this boy, soldier, convinced his mother and father there wasn't anything to do around there except to go in the coal mine, and he didn't want to end up like his father. And they put him, they signed papers. He was 16, went in the Army. And he was a duplicate of John Wayne physically, he really was. The first time we got up on one of those hills, those Chinese they had short trenches. Their average trench wouldn't be much wider than this room. And they'd have caves running off of it. Anyway, when you get to one of those caves, would be assigned like 2 of them. Well, you'd take the first one, and what you do is, or Sergeant would, he'd say, Smith and Jones, you go that way, and Jim and Ron, you go that way, and you run them out of the trenches. Everybody else would get there and kind of hover. And they never balked. They just, whatever he told them to do, they did it. They didn't. He wouldn't tolerate insubordination of any kind. He had his own way of enforcing it.
Well, you know, you've probably oft heard the deal about how it's really the sergeants who run the Army, so.
I believe that.
Yeah.
I told him, I said, you get up on top of this hill and get everything settled down and come back and get me. I'll stay here to get it done.
Right.
But he never had a sense of humor. And he's only, I guess he's 22, 23 years old.
Very
Been in the Army
serious.
5 or 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, while he was the first sergeant, we had the first sergeant in that A company. Had been over there ever since the Korean started.
Mm-hmm.
He said one day to me, and I said, why in the world do you keep staying over here? You can go home. You've got enough points to go home. And he said, where else can you kill somebody and get away with it? That'd be your attitude. Stay. But
It's good to have
anyway, he
somebody like
finally
that.
gave up and went home. And Deskins was sergeant, and became first sergeant for the company. And he'll have to be young for that in a period of time that he was there. But he was a good one.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never been able to find him since I've been home.
Huh.
You know, oddly enough, when I got out of the Army, I didn't want anything to do with it. I was trained to be a lawyer, and I've been interrupted, I guess, and I wanted to get at it.
Mm-hmm.
And I regretted that, because I think I missed some good times, not meeting with them and staying close to them and so forth.
Do you happen to bump into any Arkansans while you're over there?
No, we had one lieutenant that was from Pine Bluff, but he didn't stay but a week or so. And circumstances were such, I never really got to know him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a fellow here in Little Rock, there's two. Actually, after I went over to I Company, one of them's a black, I started saying black youngster, he was a black youngster back when I knew him well, who lives here in Little Rock, and every once in a while we run into each other and call and visit. And the other one is now deceased. He lived in Jacksonville. And both of them real nice people. One, the black fellows, a minister, and he worked with the lumber company.
Mm-hmm.
He saw my name in the paper for some reason, and some fella sued him. This is back to where everybody had insurance. And some fella sued him, and he came up to my office and he said, I need some help. He had parked his car, gone to work on the street. And this fella had come along, driving, had a heart attack and ran into his car. And the lawyer claimed that that's what killed him. His car was parked on the street, Anyway, the court finally knocked it out, Didn't say, well, heavens, we don't have any real evidence that that's what killed him. He died of a heart attack, for it anybody knows. So they dropped the lawsuit ultimately. I said, well, you'd never come to see me if it hadn't been for that. He said, no, son, I probably wouldn't. He let it back before people, I guess were standoffish among races. And we weren't. In the Army, because we ate out of the same trough, so to speak.
And everybody
Literally.
was in there together, so
Yeah.
you had to depend on each other. Yeah. So what would you describe, if there was such a thing as a typical day for you while you were over in Korea?
Well, I'd say, normally one of those charges up a hill would last, that'd be about a 5-day battle in the sense you'd be doing something there for 4 or 5 days.
Mhm.
Other than that, most of the time, it was night. They'd probe you at night, and you know, the day was pretty dull. You know, and, we sort of had a standing order between my sergeant and I when we were in that sort of situation. He was Army and I wasn't, and so he could meet all the people who were going to do the inspections and this, that, and the other, and I'd sleep. Then at night I'd get up and stay awake mostly at night and make sure everybody else stayed awake. And ultimately, you know, you'd be in a more or less a trench. At least it wasn't a trench, it'd be foxhole.
Mhm.
And what normally would happen throughout the day, you'd get, I said artillery, and primarily I guess they shot, used mortars, which virtually the same thing, as far as I'm concerned. And they'd try to do it in such a way that you'd be up stirring around. You know, they wouldn't do it every hour on the hour. They'd do it 15 minutes this time, and they'd wait 30 minutes, and then they'd periodically do that throughout the day. And at night, as I say, they normally would, if they had pretty good results, feeling of you, you know, probing you, well, they'd try to hit you pretty hard.
Mhm.
Well, what they had was, in those trenches over there, they had in those caves, they had them full of people.
You were Chinese.
And when, you know, those tunnels would go back 200 or 300 feet.
Mhm.
And then they'd branch out and go 200 or 300 feet, and they'd fill them up with people. And they would dig air holes where there was a little shrub or something, where you wouldn't see it if you walked around. So if they got a feel, if they made some progress, but they had those people pretty close by, they could run at you. And you know, you'd that's the reason I stayed awake at night. Of course, by then the sergeant was up too, as far as that goes. Time to hear anybody, anytime anything like that, the whole thing would come get awake.
Heard a lot, read a lot about hearing a lot of bugles and stuff. The Chinese use bugles.
Yeah, you know, everybody, the only time I ever saw that in a movie, they'd play like a bugle. Well, what it was, where I was, I never heard a thing like that. It was like these things you have on New Year's Day, woo, you know,
Okay.
and that's what they blow.
Mhm.
Of course, when that blew that, your
You knew
hair on the
something
back of your neck was, woo,
Oh yeah, I'm
you
sure.
knew something's fixing to happen there.
Uh-huh.
Of course, it always had to be pretty close, so you wouldn't hear it, I don't guess.
Right.
And every night, we, the company, you know, 3 rifle platoons and a weapon platoon, would have to send out a patrol in their area. That was mandatory. Unless you were just bucked up against it, you know, where you couldn't get out, so to speak. And you'd have a particular assignment. Sometimes you'd have to probe, which wasn't fun at all. And it never struck me as being very practical. But anyhow, if you did, you'd probe until it got hot, so to speak.
What was involved in probing? I mean,
You just, where you know, you could see where the positions were, and you'd try to see if you could find a soft spot where their automatic weapons were, and you're always trying to find the enemy, capture, captive. We never did. We never caught one. Once in a while somebody would. Mostly they would. The only one I ever saw alive walked in voluntarily in our unit. But every once in a while you'd hear somebody actually captured someone. But they would, you'd go back after one of those patrols and you'd tell them what you'd seen. And you'd find where they're digging sniper holes, things like that.
Was that a daily occurrence, those patrols?
It was we do it at night, and it was every third night. It was your time.
Okay.
Let me think now, I believe it's it may have been every fourth time you would make contact in some fashion. Sometimes that wasn't hard to do. They'd make contact with you.
Yes, you
Now
come.
see that, and you like that better, actually.
Right.
Because you're down, sitting down there, you're organized and down and going great.
Right.
Well, you're better off than trying to.
Just walking out there blind, basically.
It's awful. It's awful easy in combat like that to lose contact control. And it's almost essential if you're going to really function that you got to keep control. You got to keep control. And it was hard as the Dickens. That's the reason you didn't shoot much.
Right.
You tried to keep that organization.
Right. A few minutes ago, you had talked about when you would have to assault different hills and things. What did you do? How did you prepare for an assault? What would you do? I guess you kind of figure out the terrain and all that kind of stuff.
I read where you'd actually practice it. You'd do a dress rehearsal, so to speak. I never participated in a dress rehearsal, and I went up several of those hills. But primarily, you would study the terrain. The sergeant and I would. The higher ups would have it all picked out what you ought to do and how you ought to attack it.
Right.
And the sergeants, and if it was like most of the ones we were in were company sized. They'd put a company up, and then usually they'd put a company in reserve. So if the first company bogged down, the second company would come up. And 9 out of 10 times they'd bog down, so you had to come up with it. And you would go up then and decide, on a joint decision. That's the reason I said it didn't take a great mind to be a platoon leader or a company commander. You decide, you're going to go up in columns, platoons. That one good thing about being the third platoon. Normally they top them off. The one that's first or second and third was always in reserve. So sometimes you got a little break there. Yeah. But the first platoon would charge. It'd be the first platoon by number, but anyway, the one platoon that was designated would charge. And almost invariably they would soften the place up with artillery and mortars. Particularly, I guess every infantry soldier loves mortars because they're close at hand. You feel like they know what they're doing or something. The other people you never see.
Right.
And of course, you got a man with you that's directing the fire. And when I'd say you get down in position as close as you could get and be in not completely hidden. They'd probably know you were there, but you had to have a place to form.
Right.
And then when they lifted that fire, which is the artillery, which I'd say 5 minutes before you actually went up, you'd start up the hill, and they teach you not to run, but to fire, walk and fire. Invariably, you'll run over whatever you want. Sure. They say that last 5 minutes when they lift that fire. And of course, normally, the enemy will lift its fire. Almost always. Sometimes fighting the Chinese, I don't think I ever really saw it when they did this, but I've heard people say that they kept the fire going even though they were shooting in their own people.
Huh.
But anyway, they came, that's God's 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Because you ain't got no help then.
Well,
Just you and God. And that's a pretty good description, I guess.
yeah.
Because you were mindful of it, didn't you?
Right. I was just going to ask you, and you're down there at the base of the hill, about to go up it. What's going through your mind?
Well, mighty, there's no talk.
Yeah.
You can tell there's no talk. Almost silent. Even though you're standing next to one another,
Uh-huh.
And they say the only reason you go up is because the other fellow does.
Mm.
And I guess that's true. The old William Tecumseh Sherman of Civil War fame said the hardest thing in the world to do is get a man to charge one of those positions, and I guess it is.
Mm-hmm.
But as I said, I never saw. I've heard of them. I never saw one quit.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing what a bunch of young
That's
Koreans can do.
wouldn't let him. He just,
Yeah.
I guess they hated. They feared him worse than did the circumstances or something.
Yeah, I guess so.
I have to tell my story. You talk about the first time I went in there like that. Well, we got up on the hill and we dug in. And this battalion commander came out there. Well, we've been the only platoon up there. And this battalion commander came out there and he said, I don't know why he went to all that trouble. We were probably 200 yards in front of what would be the rest of the people. And a little knoll. He said, we didn't have any telephone connections, you know, he carried a roll of telephone wire, and he said, you've got connections right now, but you won't have them 5 minutes, he'll break them with the artillery. And he said, the last time I was in one of these situations, when they used the radio, they put those circumstances in there and got 5 people killed.
Hmm.
So you're not to use the radio. He said, I'm going to be, and he showed, pointed back there. He said, I'm going to be right up there on that hillside, and we're going to give you all the help we can. It's getting dark, isn't it? But he said, if you get to where there's any doubt in your mind, he said, do you know what the doctrine of the infantry in defense is? Hold at all costs. And I tried to be cute. I said, well, if I flunk that question, do I get to go home? He didn't appreciate my humor. Anyway, he said, you're not to use that when if you're under attack and you can tell we're not helping you. He said, here's 3 grenades, and they're all one color. I've forgotten what they is. Rifle grenades.
Uh-huh.
He showed me, he said, you shoot one of these. And we'll know that we need to give you all the help we can. I said, we're not going to come out here and help you. We're going to help you from on top of that hill. Anyway, sure enough, about good dark, it started. And they had planes flying over, dropping flares.
Uh-huh.
And they did. You could hear them. You could see them shooting from up there on the hill. Of course, we were shooting. And in the melee, I could see from those flares. God, that whole, looked like the whole, not the Chinese army, but the whole Chinese nation were coming at me, you know. At us, I shouldn't say me. Anyway, pretty well they'd be low, and then it'd start again, and they'd be low, and then start again. And finally, it got quiet, tell it's fixing to come daylight. And I said to myself, I gotta figure me a way out of here. This can't be my cup of tea. And I sat there and I weighed the difference between just getting up and walking off and staying. I thought, you know, it can't be too embarrassing. They wouldn't put you in jail forever, surely. They wouldn't want to feed you all the rest of your life. But I figured, you know, I seriously figured, well, I'd lose my law license that I spent 5 or 6 years getting. All this, that, and the other. And finally I decided, well, I'll give it one more trial here before and oddly enough, that was probably the hardest fight I was ever in, I'll tell you. Because, boy, I'll tell you, they really came at us.
You remember where that was?
The best thing about it was, we only had 2 people hurt. And it's just impossible to imagine how we could have gone through this. We had trees over us and the shell would hit these trees. And my arms, where that would be hot, where that remnant that hit my arms and the back of my head.
Wow.
Couldn't pull your head.
Okay, we're back again with Perry Whitmore talking about the Korean War. And so when we left off there a second ago, you were talking about, I guess you said it was one of the most difficult experiences, toughest fights that you had over there.
Yeah, I guess it was.
Were you ever injured or anything during your time?
No, I fortunately never. I guess the closest I ever came, I was near walking. Well, I was talking about that harassing fire that they'd put in from time to time, and a mortar shell landed. I was always a conservative by nature, and I was wearing one of those flak vests. And the thing hit me in the back, a piece of shrapnel did, and knocked me down. And when I got up, one of the fellows came over there and, you know, it was a fairly calm day, by the way, that thing just happened then. And I pulled off my vest, and there was a piece of shrapnel in that vest. It was caught in that vest, which is about the size of the end of your thumb. And it had penetrated the vest. And I guess this fellow kiddingly said you'd be entitled to the Purple Heart, because it did.
Put a little scratch on you?
Put a little bit of a scratch on me. But I didn't, you know, it didn't hurt. It didn't even stun me or anything like that, but it knocked me down. And that was, I guess, the closest I ever came. I said one time, you know, going up one of those hills one time, I believe the old Chinese army was shooting at me, but they missed me. Incidentally, they were poor shots.
Well, that's a good thing.
But yeah, and you know, they didn't, they had those, mostly those grease guns, and they didn't intend to shoot you at long range, you know, they charged in on you and want to shoot you with those little submachine guns, which are just not accurate.
Right.
They jump around, you know, and I guess that's the reason this very few people that I know of hurt.
Well, that was
those things. The most we ever lost, we did one, well, the largest battle I was in was the last one where we straightened the line for the last hill.
Do you remember where that was?
That was James Russell Hill, I mentioned it a while ago. And that is amazing to me because I mentioned the fact that they'd started practicing these things, having dress rehearsal. The account of that thing that I read later, the general was very proud of himself, and I'm sure he was a good general. I never met him, but he's probably
Most generals probably are proud of themselves.
Yeah, he was proud of the fact that they did this dress rehearsal. Well, I mentioned the fact that they had a dress rehearsal, and some way I missed it because our unit didn't participate in it at all. We went up the hill with the rest of them, and I say, a fellow down here at basketball coach, now retired at Ouachita University, was in the next regiment. I didn't know that till later. And he said he didn't go to any rehearsal. But anyway, he's maintained that he had the shortest combat record of anybody on history. We started up that hill. Of course, I didn't know he didn't be over there. Didn't know him at the time. Anyway, he said he started up that hill. He hadn't gotten more than 10 or 15 yards till he got hit. He fell over there, and he said he kind of felt around on him, and I forgot, he got hit in 5, I believe. He thought, well, I'm not so bad off. Said everybody else was going on. He got up, started off. Said he got about 5 more yards. He got hit. That time he couldn't get up. So he said that's the shortest combat on record anywhere.
Probably.
Then you ought to get hold of him, find him.
We need to. I'll get his name and everything afterwards.
I'll give you his name. He and I married a girl that finished high school about the same time, and I've never met him. But we've talked to the Korean War some between us. Of course, he came on home.
Yeah.
After that battle, I kept going.
Wow.
Which I was fortunate there.
So were you at Pork Chop Hill as well?
Pork Chop, was one that they fought over 3 or 4 or 5 times. And we spent about a month up there. The winter. We went up there, I believe, on New Year's Day of 53.
3. Yeah.
53. So I went over there in 52. We went up there on 53. We were off. We went up there. It'd be the New Year's Day or a day or two before New Year's. On 52. We stayed up there almost a month, the better part of a month. And you'd think they could, no way they could take that hill. And they didn't take it while we were there, but they didn't try hard enough, I guess. But it had barbed wire and mines, everything in the world around it. And some way or the other, they took it, and we went up there and took it back temporarily. They retook it, and then the last time they said it wasn't worth. The war was almost over, and so they didn't really put an effort on it like they had before.
Right.
So we were the last ones up there. I always said I was close to the last person there because on that hill, because American, because when they got ready to come off the hill, the battalion commander sent 2 of us, another lieutenant there and myself, to make sure that everybody got off the hill. And they mined it, but they sent the P&A platoon. Yeah, P&A platoon up there, and they mined it behind them. And we had to get up there and back on tracked vehicles where you could cross it. And
That'd be APC.
yeah, after we got off the hill, That's the only time I ever saw the Air Force. I guess it's Air Force. Anyway, they covered up with napalm.
Mm-hmm.
And the next morning, I didn't see this, I was told. It said that the Chinese stayed up there, and I don't know how in the world they did with all that napalm, but anyway, they brought down a goodly number of Americans that were scorched.
Mm.
And I wondered what a shame it'd been if any of them had been alive, which was very doubtful that they were. But
Yeah.
I always said that while I was a platoon leader, I had the equivalent of 2 platoons. Shot out from under me, I guess would be a good way of saying it. One of them was on that trip I was mentioning up Jane Russell Hill. One fellow said we came off of there with 14. We started with about 40.
Mm.
We came off the hill with 14. I thought we came off with somewhere in the neighborhood of 20, but we had some recruits come in during that period of time. I don't know how many now, I don't remember, couldn't remember. But other than that one occasion where we really got hit bad, the rest of them were sort of, we lose 3 here and 4 there and 5 yonder, and way the majority of them were wounded and not killed.
Right.
The medics were just terrific.
Mm-hmm.
And those hospitals close to us, and they almost by the time you'd get one of those hills, the Corps of Engineers, the combat engineers would have a road, and they'd send those ambulances and jeep, had those. Things you carry, folks, so can't think of.
Stretcher, litter.
They'd have those on them, and they'd come up through there.
Mm-hmm.
Just any kind of a little road, they'd get up through there and carry the wounded out.
Okay.
And it was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
At least I had a chance to dig me a hole.
Right.
Had a thing to guard myself, help myself out with, and this, that, and the other. And they didn't. They just, by God, had nerve. They just come up through there, pick them up and carry them to the hospital. Yeah. And those MASH hospitals were, they were, I'd say fully equipped. I don't know what I mean when I say that, but they were capable of sophisticated treatment.
So speaking of MASH, I just have to ask this because I ask all of the veterans. What do you think of that television show MASH?
Oh, I just thoroughly enjoyed it. The only thing was I thought they were a little bit too
a little looser than it was in reality.
I never, I've always said that they didn't make any bones, but there were 4 or 5 of us that landed over there at the same time. And they told us right off, this isn't any battle about apple pie and Mama Jones.
Mm-hmm.
This is simply to keep the Russians from getting too carried away, because the Russians had more tanks in the, I don't remember how they described it, Poland.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a typical route militarily.
Right.
And that there wasn't any way, the best we could do in Europe if the Russians broke out would be delayed.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of trying to come over the Himalayan mountains again was not accepted.
Yeah.
So our sole purpose was to get a staging area. And he had a map there, and I don't remember, I'm not enough of a military expert to say, but he had it all mapped out there how you'd go from Korea to
Now, who was this
Moscow.
again? This was. That had
It's
it
the
now.
Army.
Okay. Hmm. Yeah. I bet that
Of
was.
course, that's the reason they fought so hard for pork chop. Pork chop was,
Mhm.
they called it the gateway to Seoul.
Oh, okay.
And it was, I don't know, 100 miles plus,
Mhm.
150 miles again.
I think the last fighting at Pork Chop was in June or July of '53, which is, the armistice was signed shortly after that. So you were at Pork Chop that last time? Okay.
Like July, I think.
Yeah,
I
I think
can't
it was.
remember for sure.
I think it was July.
I was supposed to be on the way home when they, it had been taken and retaken there a time or two, and then we pulled off and were sort of in reserve, I remember. And they got word before it was ever hit the last time that they were probably going to hit it. And so they canceled all of us coming home and leaving. And we stayed, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks longer.
Mhm. So were you on
And
the?
I was been relieved of my company, and I just sort of lollygagging around there. So that's how I ended up having to go and up there on the hillside and tell them, we're going to pull off here and so forth. And
What was the last company that you were?
Mike.
I company.
Mike,
Mike. Okay. Yeah.
they would go with
Right. Right.
Mike, the last company in the four is always a weapons company.
Oh.
That's the best one you can get.
So what kind of weapons did they have?
We had the recoilless rifle and we had the big mortars, 82nd, 82nd, 82,
81st, 81.
81
Yeah, I
millimeter
think they're
mortars.
81s.
We had the mortars and the heavy machine gun.
Mhm.
And let's see, we had a fourth. What was it? I don't remember those things. That's the best one because one was that I'd get to ride with the battalion commander when, almost, at least every other day. Somewhere or the other they'd have a get together with hierarchy. And he would normally take me and the S3, I don't know what to call the S3, what he does. He's the one that, he's sort of like the offensive and defensive
Coordinator for
coordinator
football.
in
Yeah.
football. He's the main one of the staff. One of them, was supply, and the other one's intelligence, and one's administration, and so forth. And he's the one that's straight to keep on the combat situation.
Okay.
And you'd go back with those things. One thing about you'd get warm. I said I got cold. I got cold when October came and didn't thaw out to the 4th of July. Well, a little bit of an exaggeration, but
Yeah, I meant to ask you
best
about the
thing
weather.
about being with the battalion commander back there when they'd have these get-togethers, briefings, they call them, and they'd get the orders, what's happening here, there, and yonder. Was you got to get warm.
So how did you deal with the cold? I know you're there
Well,
in the winter
on
time.
top of all the other parts of trying to do that is I'm cold natured. I get cold at the drop of a hat. Main thing, I guess, for us was they furnished us those heavy coats, parkas. Those old Mickey Mouse boots, they call them, they made you look like Mickey Mouse. And they were, given any opportunity at all, you could stay warm.
Yeah.
And we didn't have as cold a winter as it had the winter before either. I think that was part of it.
Mm-hmm.
it got down, if I remember, it got down like 10 below zero fairly frequently. And the
That's
snow
pretty
stayed
cold.
there all, the snow pretty well stayed there from the time it fell. It have thaws, but it never completely thawed. And become another snow before we all left. And the one good thing about it, it kind of snowed on their side too, and kind of thawed them down a little bit, calmed them down, cooled them off, whatever.
So were you on the line the whole time, or would you rotate back off the line? Kind of.
Well, we only went on one, what I'd call, really reserve. We went back between Thanksgiving and New Year's. We spent Christmas in camp. That's the time I said we lost 14 out of 40, or we had 14 out of 40 left, or something in that neighborhood. And we went back and I think I messed up my deal here.
You're right.
I'm sorry.
Oh, it's no problem.
We went back and we had a nice Christmas. We even had a USO show. Nobody wanted to go, but they made us go. We marched over to see the USO show. At night, one evening, it's cold as the dickens. And I bless those actors and actors and all for doing it, because they were cold too. And they did it, but I don't know, you just weren't in the humor mood for it, I guess.
Right.
And the one we saw didn't have Bob Hope.
No big names.
No big names.
Yeah.
Nobody really wanted to go, and I think they embarrassed the unit or something, so they made us go.
Huh.
But that was, we'd have periods where we'd go back for a week. We'd be changing positions. Like I say, when you take one of those little hills, or the big one either, it'd be pretty hot there 4 or 5 days, and then they'd kind of give up and fall back. And only one time we ever lost contact with them while I was there, and we had to go find them, and that was a cold trip too. And real cold. It turned cold kind of suddenly, because it hadn't snowed until after we got back from there, I don't think. But you know, you'd leapfrog. A company would be up first, and they would take the lead, and everybody else would kind of be following them. They'd have people on the flanks. I told you about having those Indians. Every time, you know, it'd be our time to be the lead, we'd put the Indians out. Finally, one of them told me one time, he said, you know, just because I was raised on a reservation, said I get scared just like everybody else. I don't hear any better than you do, and I don't see any better than you do. Which, you know, it's just natural to think.
Right, you're kind of the scout, natural scout, I guess.
Seen that in the movies so much, you know. So, and what they would do would be the lead. You know, they'd leave like a platoon back there, and the platoon would throw a bunch of mortars at you. You'd have to run them off, and then you'd march some more, you know, the whole bunch would march. In our case, I think it was just a battalion. I never saw them. They had some tanks. One of the few times I ever saw the tanks move. We'd have tanks, but they'd be more or less stationary up there on the line.
Did you ever have any interaction with any of the Allied soldiers from other countries?
Well, we had the Ethiopians.
Okay.
I think I told you that.
No.
The Ethiopians, we have what they call a square regiment. We had 4 battalions, or regular regiment just has 3. And the 4th one was the Ethiopians. One of the sister regiments had the Colombians, and the other one had the Turks. And of course, the Ethiopians were notorious. They had what they call, right there near the end, they had switching prisoners. And, you know, I went up I don't know why they sent me up there, I couldn't have identified anybody, but they gave me certain keys, asking about baseball, or asking about politics, something like that, if there's any question. And they ended up, I was sitting in the tent. But anyway, we had to go by and get the Ethiopian to go up there with us. And the Ethiopian didn't want to go. They spoke the officers only spoke English, at least that I ever saw. And the English, this guy said English was very formal, very precise, difficult to understand. But anyway, he was telling us that he didn't want to go. This guy was having trouble talking him into it. So I entered into argument with him, and I said, you know, you come on and go. Why don't you want to go? And he said, we don't have any prisoners up there. If we do, we don't want them back. I told this fellow, well, finally I convinced him to come ahead and go anyway. I said, we're supposed to bring you. So he went, but they didn't have any prisoners. I was a liaison officer. I was talking about we were back there in Thanksgiving. We were in reserve. And I had to go over and have Thanksgiving dinner with the Ethiopians. And, you know, their battalion commander never, he stayed about 2 or 3 miles back there. And that was expected of him, you know. He wasn't expected to do it. Anyway, I got to meet the battalion commander. We ate Thanksgiving dinner here, and I don't know who it was I ate with, but there were, well, I guess there were 10 or 12 of us that ate with him. I was the only American. But anyway, what they did, they took the turkey and they took it off the bone and they put it in a stew pot. And they put just about as much cayenne pepper as you can imagine on it. And it was just gooey as it could be. And the longer you chewed on it, the better it got. So I tried to eat that. In fact, I made myself eat it. I thought, oh, goodness. What a disgrace to turkey. I got back to our unit. I wanted turkey and dressing. That's what they had. They'd eaten it all. Turkey and dressing. I guess my most famous patriot was a fairly recent West Point graduate who was out to, he's going to win the Medal of Honor. That was his ambition. And he got as far as the, what's under the, I don't even remember now what's next to
the
Medal of Honor.
Distinguished Service Cross, is that what it is?
Yeah, something like that. But he was a fine old boy, but you know, I said after the war I didn't do anything for 40 years or so, and then I decided I'd see if I could find all these people. And our company commander stayed in the Army, and he won the Distinguished Service Cross. And he was deceased. I found his son, who's served the Army, and Buck, one of the West Pointer, died, and I never could find anybody that knew him. The only other officer that I've ever been able to find, I heard from him today, as a matter of fact, a fellow named Bud. Well, heck, I just heard from him today. Anyway, I always said he was one of those fellows that was a gold brick. He always managed somehow not to be there when it came time. When it came time to do something. And he ended up winning all the medals you can imagine. I said that he conned these people into giving him medals. He's a dandy. And believe it or not, he was a real success in civilian life. He was a salesman. And he'd sell a place till he wore out his welcome, then he'd go and get him another one. He did well. Lives in that South Carolina place where they play golf. Oh, heck.
Myrtle Beach.
A nice big home. Well, I said, I would bet you'd do this, bud.
That fits him. So were you ever awarded any medals while you were over there? Any
Not while I was
commendations?
over there, oddly enough, but when I got, one was awarded me while I was over there. They gave, right before I came home, they gave me the Silver Star. And after I got home, they sent me the Bronze Star. And the, what's the one under the Bronze Star, whatever it is. And of course, we got the, I just got a copy of it the other day. We got the, it's a blue badge.
Oh, the combat infantry badge.
So I got the combat infantry badge, but this is the unit,
Oh,
Presidential Unit Citation. We were awarded that, which, that's the one that they had a, I guess you'd call it a parade. Anyway, they had a gathering after, while we were back there in reserve, and they gathered the whole, somebody said the whole division. I don't think it's the whole division, but anyway, they had a parade to our honor since we've been awarded the Presidential Unit Citation. And they paraded the tanks and this one and then that one and the other one. And the fellow got up to, I don't know who he was, the Corps commander or somebody. And he told us what a great honor it was to be awarded the Presidential Unit Citation, blah, 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 blah. Well, he sits down, and then the division commander, by that time, you know, you're pretty dogged out anyway. He had talked long enough, and we'd had the parade. The division commander gets up and he talks. Finally, the regimental commander gets up. Only part of the group got it. Our battalion. And the part of them was another battalion. Anyway, he got up, the division commander, the regimental commander, and he said that when they were back there talking about who was going to take the lead in taking that hill, that he told the division commander that there wasn't one regiment that was capable of taking that place, and that was the 32nd Infantry, the 32nd.
is that Jane Russell Hill or Pork Chop?
Oh, that was Jane Russell.
Jane Russell.
And he said that the division commander took his word for it, and sure enough, here we went. And some old boy said, "You way back there in the rank, you know, we're all standing there assembled. Some fellow hollered out, 'Next time, keep your damn mouth shut.'" No, not everybody had an idea who it was, but nobody ever really knew. You know? But you could hear him all over the place. I'll tell you one other time the guy blasted off like that. We were going up this dang canyon. There's two platoons on one side and one platoon on the other. And we were being led at night, and we were going up on this place. They had to cut the battalion in two. The enemy was between two companies in the battalion. We were going to root them out of there. Anyway, it was getting, well, I'd say it's after midnight before we even started up. There's, like I say, one batch on that side of the canyon, one batch on this side of the canyon. Everybody trying to be quiet because we got up on top of if we get up on top of the canyon, we'd be on level ground, and you'd rather fight on level ground. Anyway, the word came back. I knew what was happening. See, we were being led by a major. And, you know, it just wasn't plumb daylight, but it got close. And I could see the word was coming back. Finally the word got to me, and it said, "Fix bayonets." And that makes your hair stand up on your head. I passed it on, you know, fix bayonets. Incidentally, I had a carbine, I think, at that time, which doesn't even have them. But that didn't worry me. But anyway, some old boy in the very back, 4 or 5 places there from me, yelled out the top of his lungs. He said, "You're just kidding me, aren't you?" So help me, all hell broke loose. They started throwing, we hadn't even heard us. So he yelled out.
Gave position away, yeah.
I thought, you idiots, you.
Yeah.
He was protesting in his own way.
I suppose he was.
You're just kidding me, aren't you?
So did you ever run into any Korean civilians while you were out, or they pretty much all cleared out there?
Yeah. We had camp followers, you know. I'm sure if you stay out just much longer, you'll hear of a reply by endorsement. You know, you didn't always have a typewriter and all with you, so they'd send you an order or something on make sure you got it and make sure you had responded to it. While it'd say on there, reply by endorsement. You endorse your response on the same piece of paper. And, oh, it was a miserable day over there. I remember the first sergeant, incidentally, my first sergeant, not Defkin, but the first sergeant that we had when I was in my company, I always said he was with Washington at Valley Forge. He had been in the Army forever. And of course, one reason he'd been in the Army forever, he didn't go close to the front line unless it was an absolute necessity, but he took pride in bringing the mail up. And we were stuck up there one day and it was raining, a miserable type of situation. Somebody came by and said, the sergeant down there with the mail, and he said, tell you, he had a letter for you. But it turned out it wasn't a letter, it was one of those orders from the battalion. And the order had to do with the fact that there was a soldier there that was lost 3 duty days due to having a social disease. And it ended up with reply by endorsement, explained why this soldier had lost 3 days for duty due to the social illness. That just made me madder than the devil. I thought, I think I've got time to ride herd on these fellas. So I replied by endorsement by saying I didn't know her name, but if he was interested, I would see if she had a sister. Well, fortunately, I don't know what they'd have done with me if it had gone on too, but fortunately the first sergeant had sense enough not to send that. He saved my life, yes.
Yeah, you probably got in trouble on that one.
But the last tale, and then I'm going to shut up, was the
no.
battalion commander came to me. He was a West Point I was talking about. A real good soldier. He said, Whitmore, you managed to dig your hole deep enough that you've lived long enough to be one of the senior lieutenants. And as such, you get the first choice of being an aide to the general of the corps commander. But he said, I'm going to tell you something. He said, you know, if I have a uniform made to fit you by a tailor, and I'd shine your shoes up so you could see yourself in them. And he said, if I'd polish your brass, put it on you, he said, you'd still look like a civilian trying to play soap. He said, I don't think you'd fit in as a general slave in any fashion. But you're entitled to it if you want to go. I said, no, I believe you're right, Colonel. I don't believe I'll go. He got a kick out of me, as I say, he's a West Pointer, because, you know, I'm just an old country boy. He sort of liked that. Right before we this is all right at the last. They said the fellow that taught English at West Point, over there, he was a full colonel. Over there, because they wanted to elevate him to general, he was getting, you know, I'd say he's getting up in age. That doesn't mean I guess he's in his 40s, I don't know. Anyway, he came over there at that age looking for a little bit of combat experience so he could get raised to the office of general in those recoilless rifles. You know, when you shoot one, the doggone back blast, it just goes dust everywhere. And if you could shoot one up there on the line, well, it made the Chinese madder than the devil, and they would just blast back with everything they had. Well, the battalion commander didn't like the idea. They sent this, he called him an idiot, over. You know, he'd never seen any combat. They had him a regimental commander. And so he said, new regimental commander's coming up here tomorrow to inspect lines. And he said, when he gets to your unit up there at the I company, because my unit was kind of spread out then, my company. He said, I want you to shoot that recoilless rifle. He said, I said, I guess you know how to catch the Dickinson. He said, that's exactly what I want to happen. I said, I want that son going to get some feeling about combat. Well, we did. We shot that. Actually, he came up there. This old boy was already keyed in, but he came up to where it was, and he said, how far will this weapon shoot? The fellow said, I don't know. And he didn't. He said, well, I reckon it'd shoot as far as that tree over there on the far side, you know. And the fellow said, I don't know. He said, why don't you just fix it up there and shoot it and let's see. Well, the word went around, you know, everybody said, they're going to shoot the rifle, they're going to shoot the rifle. Everybody digging, getting in the hole, you know. Sure enough, he shot that rifle, and he didn't let one get gone, and here come the counter fire, you know. That fool, Curly, couldn't get off that field fast enough. And they relieved him. I guess they called him seeing combat, because they almost immediately sent him back home and put somebody else up there. You know?
Wow, that's interesting.
I've thought many times about some of the things they pull in MASH, and I guess that's the closest we ever had an opportunity to do it. But that particular battalion commander, last time I didn't hear from him, but I heard about him. Some fellow found him. He was then, I believe he was 87 years old. This has been several years ago. I'm sure he's deceased now. He was 87 years old and still playing golf.
Wow.
He retired in San Antonio. Apparently that's a favorite place for old soldiers to retire.
There's a lot of military bases.
That'll do me for my...
Well, I was going to ask you, did you, were you able to keep in touch with home very much? Did you write letters, receive letters?
Yeah, as I said, that sergeant, our first sergeant, took pride in the fact he delivered that mail.
Right.
And I think the Army was committed to it now.
Well, it was a big morale boost, I'm sure. So were you married? I thought you weren't married yet. Okay.
I didn't have a sweetie. So I didn't get any of the Dear John letters.
Well, that was...
Of course, every once in a while, some old boy would be hit with a Dear John. He was usually pretty blue. We did have one fellow that his wife delivered a child while he was overseas there, which everybody celebrated with him.
So did you ever hear
I had
from
one boy that couldn't read nor write, and he was from Missouri, and he went in the Army with the idea they'd teach him to read and write. He said they promised to do that. And he was kind of complaining because they hadn't ever started his, they'd sent him through the basic training, and then they hadn't started his reading, writing, teaching. I remember the sergeant told him, he said, well, they've sent you over here. If you get killed, they won't owe you an education. Actually, he and I came home on the same boat. To say he had a good head on him. I don't know why he hadn't learned to read and write. But anyway, he's the one that you've heard the first one I ever heard say something about the Forgotten War.
Mhm.
We heard the Forgotten War. We came home on about the 5th or 6th boat. Left Korea after the pork chop, after the ceasefire. And, you know, everybody got all backed out because they could see and remember what, at the end of World War II, you know, when one of those troop ships came home with the veterans, they had just a big celebration. They'd have wireless music and the girls would be kissing and all that sort of stuff, and everybody was kind of expecting that. We, as I say, came home on the same boat, and the next day we were put on the train coming home, and I ran into this fellow on the train, and I was talking to him. He said, I guess you're a little disappointed there on that homecoming, wasn't you? And I really didn't get what he's talking about. He said, oh, you know, everybody's talking about they're going to have parades and everybody's going to be jumping around, the girls are going to be smooching everybody. He said, you know what we had, don't you? And I said, well, yeah, we didn't have much, or something like that. And he said, we had a 3-piece band and 5 overaged prostitutes. Met our boat. That's the first time I ever heard he didn't use the word Forgotten War, but
Yeah, that pretty much sums it up.
that was about the truth. I don't know about the 5 overaged prostitutes. But we did have a 3-piece band, and some fellow made a little talk. Thank you for
So
being good fellas.
where did you come back to? San Francisco.
I always said, you know, they sent me over on the airplane and brought me back on the boat. I thought that a little bit unfair. But
So what did you do once you got home? I guess you got,
well,
did you get out of the service right away?
yeah. That's about the first item I wanted to do right then, get away from the Army as fast as I could. I think I felt real deprived that I hadn't gotten the opportunity to put my 5 years of educational force. And I don't really know why, because a lot of people have been disrupted at their time, and I just immediately started looking for a place to practice law. That's what I thought I'd gone to do.
Right.
I don't guess I so much want a lawyer when I left Queen Arkansas. I just wanted to get away from poverty, but having come that far, and I noticed that these poor boys at the National Guard, they had to go back every time or two. They hardly get started good before they're back in there. That doesn't seem at all fair.
So where did you start lawyering at? Once you got
Conway.
Conway. Okay.
And the reason I picked Conway was that something that happened that was seemed to be a vacancy. It turned out it wasn't much of a vacancy because, I know what it was. They elected new prosecuting attorney, and I thought, I've been encouraged to think I might be a deputy, but it didn't turn out that way, which, wasn't anybody's fault particularly. It wasn't a broken promise or anything like that. It was just opportunity, possibility. So I starved out there for a year or two and left and came to Little Rock. Almost starved out here a time or two, but managed to stay alive. But I guess everybody that, Army, it had to be the way it was, and I don't complain about it in the sense that I think there's anything wrong with it, but I wanted no part of it. That wasn't my cup of tea.
Right. So did you end up getting married?
Yeah, I'm married after, I've been back here a year or so.
Okay.
And raised my family now. They're all employed, at least now. I don't know why they're gonna stay that way with the
Economy the way it is.
yeah.
Well,
They're getting on up in middle age though. I guess they'll manage some way.
I'm sure they will.
Yeah.
So did you work for what kind of lawyering did you do once you got back here and found a job?
Well, I'll say I was always kind of happy I came along when I did. I don't guess you can hardly do that much anymore, but anyway, I guess you'd say I was kind of a general run of the mill. I didn't do hardly any criminal law. I didn't like it in the first place, and I didn't particularly turn it down when I was hungry, but it just didn't come my way. And I always liked real property, but I didn't do a whole lot of real property law. Real property law is kind of historical and not so much cut and dried. But I'll say there for 10 years, I helped old Joe Kemp manage the city legal matters, and then gradually broke off on my own and joined there were three of us, Clayton, Lowe, and Whitmore, and we had this, well, each one of us sort of had a specialty all their own, I guess. Chester Lowe was workers' compensation defense lawyer. And I guess John and I, you would call us kind of general practitioners. We had a few insurance companies that we represented, and we pretty well dabbled in everything else. But it was fun.
Yeah.
A lot more fun than it is now. You got so many lawyers now. I noticed in the paper Sunday, printed a list of all the new lawyers. God, Moses.
And so, there's a bunch of them. You ended up being a judge for a while?
Yeah.
Is that right? Circuit judge?
Eventually was elected judge. I'm always proud of that. I was elected without opposition and served 3 terms to get my retirement in, and I thought, well, that's enough. Retired, and then for, I guess, 10 years after that, I filled in here, there, and yonder. And I guess longer than that, come think about 15 years. And I handled primarily asbestosis cases. They kind of had a bunch of those. They'd been filing pretty well in federal court, and all of a sudden they started, I don't know whether they changed some rule or what now, but anyway, they started filing in state court. And they're burdensome, but in the sense there's a lot of motions and stuff that goes on, discovery probably, that goes on before they ever get out into trial. And as far as I know, I'm still the only judge in Arkansas that's ever fully tried one of them. And I guess we tried Some of them quit before they got plumb through, and some of them went all the way. But we tried about 5 cases. Take a month to try one. They'd ship all these experts in here on each side of the issue. Altogether, I think it were 500 or 600. Not individuals involved in the planing. And most of them, of course, collected something because they had some injury. Those that didn't, I guess they were not do anything as far as go under the law.
So, do you have any final thoughts about Korea? I mean, do you think that was the right thing for us to do, the wrong thing for us to do?
Of course, at the time, I don't think they did out, despite what MASH might have taught. I don't think there's any doubt that, as I said, it stopped the spread of communism. And you know, you got to be deep down in the military concept before you can realize what it meant to Russia and what it meant to China for us to have a staging place there. But it certainly was threatening, and you can see now today where Russia's getting busy trying to find a way to get past our interceptors and all. And I think it probably, I know that it made a country out of I don't know what you'd call it, you know,
Right.
Korea was a non-entity
Right.
for all intents and
Now
purposes.
has one of the largest,
Centuries and centuries.
right, largest economies in the world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they send a representative when we have one of these. I don't go to many of these get-togethers anymore. Our regiment still meets, but there's just a few of us left. But they have a representative comes from Korea and always thanks us and that sort of stuff, and they bring us up to date. And you know, they have several cities that are in the million population area of Europe. I don't know if any of them actually go that far, but anyway, he always said, you know, the most they had before was sold. And I forgot 1 or 2 other little places, but he said the whole city's turned, and the thing that the last one said was that we've got so much freedom now that the young people get together and march to throw the Americans out of Korea. He said the old folks keep telling, you don't know what you're saying, but he said they believe now we're capable of handling North Korea, which they weren't, of course, at the time.
Sure.
And they were poor soldiers. They were docile people.
Right.
Those people that came and served with us were, you know.
Well, and they've been under Japanese control for so many years before that.
Yeah.
So, anyways, well, I really appreciate you coming out and talking with us today.
I've enjoyed it.
And we've enjoyed it as well. Thanks again.
Gave me a chance to shoot the bull.